millions of Africans have realized if they simply hop in a boat and set themselves adrift in the Mediterranean, they can be picked up and quickly delivered to Western Europe. Why is Europe responsible for taking in these refugees, all of whom, by the way, I feel for, and I think that a lot of them are fleeing not just poverty, but terror, and so, you know, your heart goes out. But why is Europe responsible for taking them in?
Europe has a responsibility because basically people are arriving, people are dying on Europe's shores. This is the most deadly journey for migrants in the world. 5,000 people died in the Mediterranean last year, and this is a stain on Europe's reputation as the richest economic bloc in the world. It's also an issue...
Wait, may I stop there? Because I just want to get you to fully explain where that responsibility comes from. So you're saying that rich countries have an obligation to let in anyone who wants to come? Because why? Where does that obligation come from?
Well, Europe's responsible when people are arriving in the waters, you know, off the coast of Europe. These are international treaties. They can't be, European countries or European vessels can't send these people back to Libya. That would be breaching international law against sending people back to torture. Okay, but let's get to the core. Where does that
come from? Why can't they be sent to another country? I mean, you know exactly the point here, which is there is this amorphous sense of collective guilt in the West that makes people like you believe that rich countries, but only English-speaking and European-speaking European countries, have this obligation. Like, I don't know, Japan's a rich country too. Why aren't they obligated to take these people?
When you're talking about the richest countries, some of the richest countries in the world, there's just no excuse for letting people drown in the sea.
So rich people have an obligation, for reasons that you're not explaining or don't appear to have thought about, to take in strangers at their own expense who might pose a threat to them.
This is a crisis right now. You know, we're not talking about a normal situation where you can sort of set up programs.
But it's a crisis everywhere. I mean, maybe I've traveled more than you, but people are being bought and sold and abused in a dozen countries, at least I could name from memory, just on the continent of Africa, and I feel for every one of them. Do they all have a moral obligation to live at taxpayer expense in Omaha or Brussels? Do they? I mean, is that what you're arguing?
The problem is the Europeans are putting a lot of money in, you know, controlling their borders, in setting up programs so that people will not leave Libya. They're training the Libyan Coast Guard.
In the past 5 years, Germany has taken in a staggering number of migrants for a country its size. From 2014 to 2016, asylum applicants rose from 172,000 to 441,000, all the way up to 722,000. Now, who would have thought that all those migrants are having a big effect on the crime rate? Well, if you thought it, give yourself a star. According to the Interior Ministry of Germany, from 2014 to 16, the number of migrant criminal suspects has tripled to more than 174,000. Is there a lesson here, or should we all just pretend it's not happening? People live in Western Europe and have for millennia, and their countries are being changed and made demonstrably worse by mass migration. Don't they have a say in this? Don't you recognize that they should have a voice too? These are democracies. People get to vote and choose the policies they want. If they don't want this, why should they be scolded by you?
They do have a vote and they do have a say, and they want to live presumably in countries that have enforced the rule of law, and, you know. I'm
encouraging you to think of it from the other perspective, and you seem to be refusing to. That they're not just the rights of the migrants at stake here, but the rights of the people who live in those countries and in this country. Will you acknowledge that those are legitimate rights too?
No, absolutely. And I think everyone would benefit from this being dealt with in an orderly way.
When you take in massive numbers of people who don't speak the language, don't have a lot of education, don't have relevant job skills, you got a problem. Then you throw in the cultural and religious problem with disrespect and degradation of women, and you got a crisis. Throw in the jihadists, now you got a nightmare, and that's what Germany's dealing with. They've had all of those things.
Germany is one of the richest countries in the world. It's the economic engine of Europe, dominates Europe economically. Why would they do this?
It's the Eurocrats. It's that, PC mentality that says we want to make the world a better place. I share that. I share that. I want to help people who are in trouble. That doesn't mean you should uproot them, let them move, and bring all of them to a country where they don't have the ability to fit in. I mean, you've got right now 50% of German women say they're scared to go out at night alone. That's a problem.
Country of Sweden accepted about 275,000 refugees from 2014 to 16. More per capita than any other European country. Vast majority coming from Muslim nations. Corresponding with that influx, a rise in sex and gun crimes.
One of the things that Swedes are most scared of is rape. Even though it's forbidden to keep statistics on the rapist's ethnic background or religion, We know who is behind the near 1,500% increase of rapes in Sweden. Almost every day we can read in the so-called alternative media about rapes against Swedish women and girls committed by asylum seekers or other migrants from the third world.
In fact, according to a government survey, 1/3 of all Swedish women now say they no longer feel secure in their own neighborhoods.
There is a problem with socially deviant activity. There is a problem with crime. There is a problem with areas or hotspots of crime, be it in Malmö, be it in Gothenburg, Stockholm, or the suburbs thereof. And these things are not being openly and honestly discussed. The narrative in Sweden, the Swedish political debate, is completely false. You cannot have a debate, an honest, open debate in Sweden about immigration. Because if you don't agree with the liberal, shall we say, common agenda, then you are viewed as an outsider.
They won't acknowledge they've got a problem because that would mean admitting that everything they've believed in, multicultural ideas, are wrong, and that they shouldn't have let in 200,000 people in 2 years, and they're about to let in another 400,000 over the next 4 years. So this problem is not going away.
Whether you want to believe it or not, there exist certain no-go zones in Europe, which are areas that even police officers won't enter because it's too dangerous for them, and the government is going out of its way to cover up these problems. The truth is that sexual assaults have skyrocketed in Sweden and many other European countries in the past few years.
Up until a few decades ago, no one had heard about gang rape. Now it happens every week.
They're terrified of the crime. They're terrified of the gangs.
The men first surround their victims in circles. Some then sexually assault her, while others, not directly involved, watch or divert outsiders' attention to what is occurring. Sometimes, of course, the victim is so terrified and in a state of shock, unable to respond, and then she's also robbed during the ordeal.
Swedish police have blamed young girls, Western behavior, alcohol culture, and non-traditional gender roles for the rise in migrant attacks. The report says refugees might not be able to handle the alcohol and simply feel horny and have ignorance of the consequences for the girls.
Today in the Wall Street Journal, 2 Swedish politicians that led a move to crack down on the refugee situation, which the government did, warned America to take note.
We are unable in Sweden to socially integrate these people. It's not that they can't learn or go to school, but the Swedish politicians have had absolutely no systematic plan for integrating mass amounts of immigrants into become productive members of society.
So do you feel that you are British?
I identify myself as a Muslim. If I was born in a stable, you know, I'm not going to be a horse.
In one part of town, Ramesa and his associates have set up so-called Sharia patrols to go out and discourage behavior that they deem un-Islamic. A woman in a short skirt is abused.
Vigilante cannot dress like that in Muslim area.
I'm so appalled.
We don't care if you're appalled at all.
Muslim patrol. It's Great Britain.
This we don't care. It's not so Great Britain.
Walking through London with Ramesa, you experience an alternate reality where there is no compromise and all conversations are one-sided.
Ultimately, I want to see every single woman in this country covered from head to toe. I want to see the hand of the thief cut. I want to see adulterers stoned to death. I want to see Sharia law in Europe, and I want to see it in America as well. I believe our patrols are a means to an end.
This is a Fox News alert. Terror once again hit the streets of Paris today as a gunman killed a police officer and hurt 2 more before being killed himself.
This all unfolded just a couple of hours ago along the Champs-Élysées, one of, if not the most well-known famous boulevards here on this continent.
Attacks like this have elevated immigration to the top of French politics, and yet that country, like the rest of Europe, is still facing a flood of migrants from Africa and the Middle East. It's a deluge that shows no signs of stopping. Is there any way to keep Western Europe from becoming one vast encampment for the world's poor?
I would like to raise the voice of the people all over in Europe that they are full of fear and they are not satisfied at all what we European leaders are doing up to now. And the reason why they are criticizing us and they are not satisfied with us, why they are full of fear, is that we are not simply defend the European borders. To defend the European borders is question of will. If there is a will, there is a way. We have to find it.
We should send the military to stop the boats crossing the Med, just like the Australians did. We did nothing about it. In fact, we just had a collective kind of mourn about this baby that got washed up on the beach, and then Merkel opened the borders and said, do come, let them all come. And we're still paying the price for that now. 2 years later, and we just had 8,000 migrants arrive in one weekend to Italy, 33,000 so far this year, and more alarmingly than ever, the non-governmental organisations are providing a rescue service which is now operating more or less as a free ferry service direct from Libya to Italy. And I think that's specifically the problem now, is that we have charities providing a ferry service from Libya to Italy direct. So I can only see this problem getting worse.
Last weekend, Saxony alone took in 2,000 refugees. That's half as many as Britain says it'll accept in a whole year.
A senior German intelligence official has told Newsnight that Germany's open-door policy is fueling a rise in the far right. Gabriel Gatehouse went to find out more and sent this report from Saxony in eastern Germany.
Merkel must go, they chant. The refugees may see the German Chancellor as their saviour, but these people do not. To them, she is Mother Teresa. People's traitor, they shout. This is the backlash against Germany's generous refugee policy. These are the dissenters, and their numbers are swelling.
These people may not be the German political mainstream, but this is much more than a fringe group now. These are people who feel that they're not being listened to, and people who now feel in open revolt against their leaders.
At some point, ordinary Germans are going to say, you know, we have this kind of great country that's clean and functioning and cohesive, and it's being destroyed. And what you're going to see, and I say this with sadness, is a resurgence in German nationalism, aren't you? Ugly German nationalism.
And that's just it. You know, in some cases it's horrible to think of, but can you blame them?
Something very strange is happening in the Mediterranean right now. You know, there is a proliferation of these boats. They are more numerous by the day. They are going right up to Libyan territorial waters. They're flashing their large flashlights at night to attract the migrants to them. And there's even suggestions that now they don't talk to the Coast Guard when they are in distress, although they're already in distress before they leave the shore because they're not equipped to make the whole journey. In fact, what's happening is the migrants are speaking direct to the NGO boats and therefore calling them to help before there's really an issue.
Send them home, they chant in Dresden's Neumarkt. They've been gathering every Monday for a year now. All of this began before the arrival of hundreds of thousands of refugees. The migrant crisis has only fueled the movement.
Many of these people have got nothing to do with the far right, or at least that wasn't their primary motivation for coming here. But they do feel that they've been ignored, and there's a strong sense now that the longer that continues, the more they'll be pushed to the extremes.
Many more voters have come waving French flags and cheering in support of the National Front's Marine Le Pen in her bid for the presidency, with the latest polls predicting she's gaining ground on presidential frontrunner Emmanuel Macron.
Marine Le Pen, she's not far right, she's just of the right, and she is in the right. She wants to keep France for the French, and any idea that Macron, the centrist candidate, is going to be able to protect people. He came out tonight and he said the first job of a leader is to protect people. Frankly, he couldn't protect macaroni cheese. He's an investment banker, he's got his dad's money, he had to marry his teacher, and he had to create his own political party because no one wanted to play with him. Do not vote Macron, vote Marine and get France back for the French.
So long as the refugees keep coming, they say, they will keep on marching.